digital transformation?
Yeah, so I've worked in IT for quite a long time, and so at the start, it was like like pre 2000, 1995. It was like what is this whole computer thing about
Hmm.
anyway? And then 2000, it's like, oh, websites are so cool. Could we have a website? And then 2010, it's like mobile phones are cool. Maybe we have to put our website on a mobile phone. And now it's moved more into the, is there any blockage anywhere in the pipeline from somebody wanting whatever it is that you build, sell, service, to you delivering it? And if there is, let's get rid of it. And I guess that's what digital transformation is really. It's like totally end to end optimized processes, removing bottlenecks, and from the science fiction perspective, gradually moving people out of the loop.
Yeah, I mean, as a writer, you understand you need a reader, and that's the hardest part, isn't it? Finding the customer. And
Yes.
we can put the digital stuff on the internet all day long, and everybody's doing it, but it's so gigantic. It's hard to find the stuff that's going to entertain you unless somebody's talking about it.
Well, I mean, absolutely. But I've listened to a few things lately. It can get very, you can be very pessimistic about this, because, as you said, there's so much out there, and it's so difficult to differentiate in any way. But I'm starting to get a little bit more optimistic, just thinking that, this is a problem that will need to be solved. And
Mhm.
hopefully, if we're producing good stuff and people like reading it, um, eventually there'll be some way of that good stuff showing up into the inboxes of people that like it. It used to be like that, didn't it? You used to go into a bookshop, used to see the cover, used to know the author, used to speak to your friends, and it all used to work because there were
Yeah,
probably only a few dozen authors.
because you would associate with people like yourself, so you would word of mouth it, and you'd walk in and you'd associate. I'm a science fiction reader, so you'd be in the science fiction section,
Yeah.
and you would find the material that you would want to read accidentally, mostly. I mean, my mom's a librarian, so I mean, I just scanned the aisles of books until I found something that was interesting.
Yeah, the cover art, and then if the cover just did was basically lying to you, you'd never read that author again. And then if you got past the first chapter and you still loved it, then probably you read everything they'd ever written. I mean, that's certainly how
No,
it was for
exactly.
me.
What are you have written a trilogy?
Well, I've just finished writing book three of what will be a quartet. It was supposed
Oh,
to be a single book, got too long for a single book, was supposed to be a trilogy. Now, halfway through book two, I realized, or, after I'd written the draft of book two, I realized I was just never going to be able to tie it all up together in another single volume. So it's become four.
and we're talking about artificial intelligence. That was my grasp looking at the cover and what you're putting up on your website. Am I right?
Well, this is again something we can go into great detail about. I'm very happy to talk about it. It basically, I think, like blowing my own trumpet a little bit, and just between you and me, I think in a way I saw this whole, um, election fiasco. Um,
Our election fiasco, or you had one too, didn't you,
no, no,
in
I'm talking
England?
about yours. It's the
Okay.
election, the worldwide election fiasco. Well, it is international, isn't it? Because
No,
it's
it
got
is absolutely.
Russia as a
Russia's
key,
involved.
a
Hmm.
key. So yeah, I mean, just for me, I guess basically looking at the trend of how quickly AI is progressing, you've now got Google creating art, creating paintings with a dreaming AI. It's taught to recognize dogs, and you give it a picture of clouds, and it will find faces of dogs in the cloud, and so that's very close to creativity. And then once you sort of have a computer that can string coherent creativity together, you've got a computer that can create content. And that's, in this day and age, it's never going to be purely neutral. Nobody's doing it anymore. Even the authors, are writing to market or whatever. So no AI is going to be just motivated by getting its ideas out there. So there's going to be spin. And
What do you mean by writing to market? Can you explain that a little bit?
yeah, so what word is trending on Google? I'll write a book that hits exactly those keywords.
But isn't the game though to guess what the big thing is going to be after your novel's published? Try to be ahead of the zeitgeist, so to speak, so that when the wave hits the shore, one of the first people to step on land, basically.
it depends entirely what you're trying to do, doesn't it? So,
Yeah.
if you, I mean, I don't know what your motivation is. I've read, I was just reading a bit on your website, and I hadn't realised that that was your own writing. That you got short pieces underneath photographs that possibly inspire you. Is that what that was I was
Yeah,
seeing?
pretty much on my website.
But so you, it doesn't feel to me like you're writing um, purely for financial remuneration. It's a labor of love. Am I right?
Yeah, I love writing in terms
Yeah.
of an art form. Absolutely. I wrote my novel the same way, and it's not sold anything. And plus, I don't know anything about marketing. So it's basically
Well,
just art for me.
well, there you go. So I guess I'm exactly the same. For me, I guess it's slightly threaded through with some more grandiose ideas about maybe I'm arrogant enough to think that I can contribute to the solution for whatever humanity is and whatever it's going to become. Just as the science fiction writers that I loved when I was younger have led the way. I want to talk about those big themes, but I'm definitely not doing it just to make money. So
Mhm.
I wouldn't try and guess what the next trendy thing is, because that would in some way compromise my
Your
art.
artistic integrity. I
Yeah.
gotcha.
Yeah.
And in a way, you could accidentally your way into talking about the next big thing as well. So I mean, what is your quintet or your novels about?
So I guess, like I was saying, if you imagine that you've got AI that can create content
Hmm.
that is so clever that if you're talking to it, you don't know it's not a person, or it's you're watching a sitcom that has been written by an AI and acted out by AIs, and the bar is quite low for that type of content. So it can be just, it's quite pap, it's quite formulaic, even the stuff that's written by humans. Now you just pump out as much of that as you want. You tailor that to the people that are watching it, because you can segment your readers or your viewers, and you're moving people, you're moving society into the direction you want. And so the thesis really is that we ain't seen nothing yet when it comes to sort of media manipulation, and that the world is well past its tipping point. Something should have happened by now if it had been left to its own devices, but spin has allowed the control to be maintained, which doesn't necessarily bode well, because you're not letting off any steam from the boilers. You're just keeping it under pressure, and so which is very much, I think it's our world, but it's a very, for me, in the books, it's not quite our world. The geographical map might be the same, but the political map is different. So I didn't want to write it so that I'm not getting the dates wrong. But yeah, how we can get out of this pickle that we're in, where we're allowing ourselves, allowing the more understanding we have of our brains, we just get better and better at manipulating what we want, and controlling society, and it's not necessarily in the best interest of anybody. That's basically what the
It's
book's
very
about.
interesting though, if you think about the World War II generation, as we call them, the greatest generation. They came out of that war, and what they wanted to do was genetically enhance food so they never went hungry again. And there's a generation that went through the Great Depression and didn't have enough to eat. And now we're sitting on the cusp of a situation where food is so tasty and so calorie
Yeah, yeah,
filled.
yeah. Calorific. Yeah.
Yeah, you're basically becoming obese off the stuff that you just can't get
Yes.
enough of. It's fascinating because we're wired into the brain. Basically, we know how the
Well,
brain
that's
works.
exactly that, and I think it's the same with everything. Like, so one of the most primitive things that we have in our brain is the craving for sugar, because it was in such short supply in nature until we started farming it. But
Hmm.
that's only one of these very primitive needs we have, and as we start to understand those needs more clearly, and more cynically, we can market to them, and it's the basest, most primitive needs that are the most powerful. Food and sex and drugs.
Hmm. Comfort,
Drugs,
warmth. Yeah.
Well, absolutely, but I suppose those are harder to synthesize, so we haven't really sort of saturated the market with those yet. But yeah,
I mean, it's very interesting because you can't, honestly, you'll die if you fake warmth and comfort. You'll freeze to death or something along those lines, but you can fill yourself with this sugar and your body can think that it's full, but it's really hurting itself. Your pancreas is pumping insulin and you're damaging your body basically. It's
well, I
fascinating.
totally agree. And I think that, I don't know whether you mean that as a metaphor, but I think it is also a metaphor for all of the other sort of empty saccharine media calories that we're ingesting, which actually don't bring any sustenance. It just leaves you wanting more clicking and flipping and reading. But
Oh, totally. I mean, you're getting into that whole social media thing where you're on Twitter and you're watching the words fly by
yeah,
and you're wanting attention. That you hunger for it, don't you? You want somebody to notice what you're doing.
yeah, it's pretty awful. So
Yeah.
I guess that's the premise, and then the books try and find an optimistic futurist way out of it. So I haven't finished book 4 yet, but that's what should happen ideally if I can find a way out. Otherwise, it's going to be very much like a Japanese film where everybody dies at the end.
Yeah, I was gonna say, no wonder you're stretching the novels out to 4 when, what is the happy ending? What can you
Exactly.
envision this future that we're kind of building for ourselves? I mean, automation's on the horizon, right? People's jobs are at stake. People aren't working now anyway. I mean, your home country, my home country. I just read a report that the United Kingdom is worse off than it's ever been since they started taking down numbers. I mean, it's sad
Yeah,
state that we're in.
I totally agree. And you might, the employment numbers seem to say that it's all okay, but
No,
a
it's
lot of the people that
bullshit.
are working are not earning enough to survive on anyway. So I think it's fair to say that it's bullshit. I won't disagree with you.
And where are we going? I mean, what is the optimistic side of this? I mean, it's not. I wrote a story just recently about basic income, and
Hmm.
my premise was that that's not going to work. I mean, people are going to abuse it in some way or another, and it's not going to be enough. And people that are coming into basic income without the credit to get an apartment are still homeless. No, they're still going to be without.
Basic income is something that I think quite a lot about as well. I think something like it will be inevitable, because if there's no reason to think that the AI revolution is going to stop, and it's difficult to see many jobs that are not going to be automatable. But not only that, the way that the whole economy seems to work now is that you've got a few colossally rich people and the majority not. Uh, and that that distribution is just getting steeper and steeper. So in order for those people to be able to even consume the products which the the corporations need to sell, you're going to they're not going to be able to do any jobs. They're not going to have any money, and it's in nobody's interest to have just basically nobody even able to consume the products that the companies are creating. So even for the most cynical reasons, I can't see a way out, sort of, over the medium term. But I agree with you. I think basic income has also got issues. Um,
How do you provide that though? I mean, back in the day, you used to feed people, beating the what was it called, that the cliche of trying to get what your neighbor had, but plus more. Beating the Joneses or
keeping up
something
with the
along.
Joneses,
Yeah,
yeah,
keeping up with
yeah,
the Joneses, exactly.
yeah,
But when you have no money and everything is expensive, I mean, how much was the iPhone X? $1,000?
yeah,
I don't know who has $1,000 to spend on an iPhone, honestly.
yeah. It's crazy, but so I think. I mean, honestly, I don't think the iPhone is the best example, because you can get very cheap electronics. I think it's the stuff that is really in short supply. Like food and education
Drinkable
and
water,
healthcare.
education. Wow, man. Yeah, education's an interesting concept to broach. You're not getting good education, are you? You're getting loans if you go to college, and you're getting no jobs after the fact. It's a horrible situation. I don't know how you're going to end up twisting this
Well,
to,
honestly, I'm optimistic. I mean, we are sounding super pessimistic at the moment, but
yeah.
just a couple of things. So this isn't how I end it in the book, because my book it sort of moves it moves into the future, which I guess is one of the you know one of the ways out of the pickle that we're in, is that we are things are moving forward
Hmm.
astonishingly fast. But anyway, just before we leave that, and we can definitely get back to that, but I read actually, I think it was a podcast, the After On podcast, which I've been listening to a bit lately. And one of the guests on there, whose name I can't quite remember, was talking about um, negative taxation, which is something I'd never even thought about. So, if you want to encourage somebody to do jobs, so for example, looking after the young, the old, or the sick, which is
Hmm.
something that our society desperately needs, then you should just set a sort of the government sets a salary for that, and if the private sector is paying less for that person in full-time employment to do the job, then at the end of the year, when it's time to submit the tax, you sort of get that shortfall made up. So it's a bit like a basic income, but it's coupled to working in a sector that the government has said we need. And in a way, if you think like Australia, I don't know how America does it, but Australia used to have a point system for immigration to try and get the people in to do the jobs they wanted done. It's the same as that, but domestically, you're encouraging people to move into the sectors you want them to by subsidizing them. So I don't know whether that's the answer either, but the thing is, all of these things are possible. It's just that the politics at the moment seems to say that anything like that is socialist and evil and doesn't even get considered.
It's interesting. My grandfather used to say that somebody has to dig the dishes. Somebody has to wash the dishes. Somebody has to bring the food from the kitchen to the table, basically. And now it seems like nobody really wants to do that. It's just demeaning work. I don't know about a point system. It seems like everybody who does that work in this country is illegal. You know what I mean? That crosses the border and risks their life and limb to get to a safety city, what do they call it? And they basically work for nothing and are abused, and their lives don't matter.
Yeah,
9/11 happened, and there's like a ghost number of people who died in 9/11. They don't have any record of who they were because they were illegal. There's hundreds of them.
yeah, that's crazy. That's just crazy. I mean, this country I live in, there is a minimum wage and it's pretty high, and most people are paid well over the minimum wage to do anything. You can't find anybody to do anything for nothing.
Hmm.
Just you can't. So even somebody in the most sort of routine job has got a nice house, goes on holiday once a year. Kids are in school. Switzerland's a pretty miraculous place actually, and it's where there should be. People should take some lessons from it.
But I can't go to Switzerland. I can't cross the border into Switzerland and get a job as a janitor or a dishwasher or something along those lines. It's just not going to happen as an illegal immigrant or somebody who doesn't have a right to work there.
No, if you were European, you could. If you had a job, you can move there with a job. But I think, unfortunately, that might be, this is such a complicated political area that we're straying into now. But basic arbitrage in economics is the if there's a discrepancy between the value of a resource in two places, it will even out. So if you think about the poorest parts of the world, where people, like you said, people are going to risk death just to swim across a river to do a job that's below minimum wage.
Hmm.
I mean, that's going to bring the cost of labor down. And unless you can have a global minimum wage, which is just it's not in any way feasible at the moment, is it? So the only thing you can do is have some controls over the movement of people. And although that sounds draconian and right wing and Trumpian and everything, it's just, I think it's sort of at the moment an unescapable reality, an unpalatable, undesirable, unescapable reality.
I don't know. I mean, I know we're talking about your fiction more or less in your creativity, and this basically is what's inspiring you to write these novels. But when I think of the Trumpian method of building a wall on our border, I just think of these poor people who are suffering in their country. They're going to find any way possible to get in here.
Oh
You
no,
know
I,
what I
I
mean?
don't I don't disagree. I mean, I I don't know. I don't know what the short-term solution to this problem is, but you know, if you think about the motivations that somebody who is dying of hunger has to move somewhere, it like you said, you're not really ever going to be able to stop them.
Nope.
Uh, but if there's completely free movement, then what that will mean is that the lowest level that anybody is prepared to work for becomes the minimum wage, because that's a free market. And I know myself, there's only a certain amount I would be willing to do for nothing. You know, I wouldn't. You know, I don't know how bad it would get, but I've
If
got
you
things in
think
my
about it,
life.
though, you wrote
Yeah,
novels for nothing, right? I mean, you actually sat at a desk without the promise of a paycheck or any money coming in,
yeah.
and you wrote, I don't know, 900 pages worth of prose. It's pretty interesting. If you put that against somebody who potentially has the desire to, I don't know, X. I don't know why you would want to dig holes or be a dishwasher, but maybe there's something on the other end of that. And I keep thinking about kids, children are a
Mhm.
big motivator. You didn't do the right things. You didn't go to college. You didn't graduate high school. You slept during the day and you were lazy and got drunk. And then, oops, now you have a kid and you love them so much that you're willing to walk across that extremely hot desert, that deadly landscape to find yourself washing dishes. You can send a pittance back to your family. So maybe they can escape the poverty that you had. Maybe,
I think
possibly.
that's worthy. I think that's worthy, but I think if it's in any way possible, they should be paid a genuinely fair amount for that labor. Um, we should just try and make sure that if somebody is in full-time employment doing a job that society needs, that they can sort of have some sort of minimum level of security and quality of life. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Who washes dishes in Switzerland? I mean, is it the Swiss or is it like the Syrian refugees or something along those lines? How does that work?
Um,
Because I mean, you have a
I
pretty
would.
utopic situation where you live. I mean, I love the idea of Switzerland. Even England's a little bit better off than we are with their socialized medicine. I mean, who does the stuff that you, as a college-educated individual, doesn't, you don't deserve to do because you worked your way out of that?
Well, I mean, that's sort of like the interesting thing about Switzerland. There is huge immigration to Switzerland based upon the size of the population. I think I can't. I'm not very good at remembering statistics, but I think it's almost 25% of the population is first or second generation immigrant or
It's
married to
interesting.
one, something like that. So it's Switzerland also takes a lot of asylum seekers, so there is quite a lot of immigration. Um, so I would imagine that generally Swiss people are probably not doing those all of those jobs. But interestingly enough, most of the sort of the skilled craftsmen, so plumbers, electricians, um, very many of those will be Swiss, because there's such a strong apprenticeship type education system where if you don't go into academia, which is quite a small proportion of the Swiss population, goes to university, you do an apprenticeship in a skill, in a craft. So there is quite a strong, and that's blooming expensive. If you try and have anything done here, it costs a crazy amount of money to have done, which is, that's part of the whole uh, sort of social contract in a way. If I want some patio slabs laying down, it's going to cost me a small fortune, but that's accepted, and it's sort of, taxation is quite low, so it all actually just somehow works. I don't really know.
That's interesting. I would imagine that a lot of Swiss claim ownership over all their businesses. Do you have a big corporate scene where you have McDonald's or whatever have you moving in, and like we have with Walmart in this country, like this big conglomerate that's basically just removing people from their own private businesses?
Yeah, I think that's not that different here. It's
Oh,
sort
is it
of all
turning
big chain.
global now?
Yeah, yeah.
That's
There's
disappointing.
certainly some, niche quite nice stores, but it's yeah, it's not that we don't have those companies at all. Although there's no Amazon in Switzerland, which can be
Oh,
quite
there's not.
frustrating.
Oh,
No,
interesting. He's so rich. How rich is he? He's like 100 million billion dollars or something
I
crazy
don't
like
know.
that.
I don't know. Crazy.
Jeff Bezos, my God. I mean, talk about hoarding money. I just don't understand. I guess it's the worth of his company.
Well, actually, but uh, that's getting straying back into what I talk about in my books a bit. He's building spaceships.
Yeah.
With his money, he's not just building sort of egotistical mega yachts. He's building a business to launch stuff into space, and so that's where I take a lot of my inspiration. Those people that I don't think money was his goal. I know it's not Elon Musk's goal. He states that the only reason he's accumulating money is in order to pursue his dream of building a city on Mars. That's where the inspiration's got to come from. It's just too easily ridiculed at the moment.
No, yeah, I don't want to ridicule that stuff. I find inspiration in it as well. Do you find yourself writing in space in your novels? Are you in space at all, or are you on the planet Earth pretty much throughout the entire story?
Well, not speaking of the fourth book, but there is some space stuff going on. Um, I, I forget which I forget what's in what book, but there's some one of the things that I think is possibly the way that we're going to save ourselves is by distributing everything, so including manufacturing and technology, and with 3D printing you can imagine that you could do quite a lot. So even space launch technology is something that is hobbyist, let's put it that way. So genetically modified bamboo, making the fuselages, and 3D printed engines on the bottom, launching stuff at quite low cost. A small, a couple of families could get together and launch something if they want to, or a hobbyist group. So yeah, definitely space is a big deal in the books.
So what would you do in space as a family unit or as a small group of people striving to work together to form some kind of colony? I mean, what would you go to Mars and
Well, that's
mine
not, no.
or would you just be like your own entity and
I might have, yeah. I mean, they were just launching something into space. They wouldn't be able. They're not actually yet able to launch themselves into space, like an entire sort of self-sustaining sort of family unit. But there is space launch capability, and as the books go further on, because they sort of move, each book is sort of 10 years into the future, and the first one starts about now. Technology progresses a lot. So by the sort of where I am now, there's a lot of technology, and I think what you just touched on actually is one of the ways. Like there is something called a family unit that seems to have survived hundreds of thousands of years, and communities of small numbers of families together. And I think that's very, like, the closer we can live to nature, and by that I don't necessarily mean just dressed in animal skins and hunting buffaloes, but I mean socially and mentally, not trying to pull ourselves too far away from where we're comfortable, where we've evolved. I think that's what we should be thinking about. So exactly what you just said, they should be.
isn't there a theory in economics where eventually everything will fall apart? I don't know what it's called, but it gets so big that eventually it can't contain itself, and it will break down with these smaller units, which themselves will strive to get bigger. You know
I
what I
haven't.
mean? So that thing,
I can definitely picture it. I don't think I've ever read that, but it certainly makes sense.
right? So I mean, these family units that go up, I mean, it's so sustainable in terms of what they can do inside a large enough craft, and they can sit in the orbit and grow food.
Yeah,
They don't need to do anything. They can recycle their oxygen. They can recycle their water. They can recycle everything, and they can have a whatever you want to call it right there in the atmosphere, or on Mars, or on the moon, or just never stop and keep going forward.
yeah,
I love the idea of a generational spaceship type situation where it's just onwards and forward until you hit something else.
definitely. Yeah, there's some great books about exactly that.
I read Artemis just recently, the Andy
Oh,
Weir
have
book.
you?
Yeah.
I haven't read it. I loved The Martian. I didn't
Oh
think I
man,
was going to like it because so many people were raving about it, but
I know, right?
it's a great book.
It was a fantastic book. And what I will say about Artemis, without ruining anything, I mean, he definitely throws a plot in it that is different than The Martian.
Okay.
But his world building and the way he talks about, building a colony on Mars is just really exceptional. It
Yeah,
was a
yeah,
really well done book. I have a lot of respect for that guy in terms of a writer,
sure.
as terms of as an author. And that's one of those dudes where word of mouth, right? I mean, you come back around to people talking about your book, and you're not going to sell it. It's going to sell itself. Some
Absolutely.
maven's going to read it, and that's going to spread like wildfire.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
and as somebody who looks as art, you're writing as an art form, and that's why you do it. You still want an audience, though, right? I mean, you
Yes.
still want people to read your stuff, whether they
Yes.
give you money or not.
Uh, well, yes, but I do want to be given money. I, I mean, you can give. I guess if I could give my books away for free forever, know that people would read them, and like do some other thing to connect with the people that enjoyed my work, which paid money, I would do that as well. But
It's a
I
question
need
of
to.
how, though, or what
Yeah,
exactly,
yeah, yeah,
right?
exactly. So I don't think for me, in a way, some sort of recognition um, is difficult to have without there being money involved. It's some level. It's not about the money, but it's very difficult to judge if you're doing anything well. If I'd given away 100,000 books and I didn't know if anybody ever read them, I wouldn't feel very successful. But if
Hmm.
people have chosen to spend even 99 cents and bought that many, which I'm very, very far from, I would feel, pretty good. Until I'd got there, then I'd want a million.
No, that's very true. And it's interesting also that maybe you look at Stephen King, who started his career in like the late 70s, or maybe even earlier than that. He's obviously very, very wealthy right now. And I don't know if an author can actually reach that level of success in terms of money anymore. I just don't think it's possible. I don't think Andy Weir's a millionaire. And everybody seems to be reading his books. I mean, you can get everything for free.
Well,
That's the whole.
he's had a film made, so that's usually where real money starts. J.K. Rowling sold a lot of books, but as soon as she started making all of those films, I think she started adding zeros on the end quite quickly.
It's interesting that we were talking about the um, what is it called? I love my brain. It doesn't want to retain any information in terms of getting rid of paper and going to the digital landscape.
Oh yeah,
When J.K.
my day
Rowling was,
job.
yeah, your day job, exactly. When J.K. Rowling was starting, it was prior to that. And then, I don't know what it is. It's either Facebook or the iPhone. Something created this swing, and
Hmm.
everything was different after it.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I don't remember what the date of the first Kindle was, but I think it's either 10 years or less than 10 years.
It's not very
Uh,
long ago that everything just shifted, and it's no
exactly.
longer feasible to become a multi-millionaire author sitting in your writing space, typing on a computer and hoping to make, buku money.
I think that's right. I think that's exactly right. But like I said a bit ago, I'm relatively optimistic that things will sort themselves out. Unless, as I'm hoping doesn't happen, but as I talk about in my book, where you start having AIs writing fiction, which is just going to be such a bad thing for everybody concerned. But if that doesn't happen, then I think stories are one of the core, uh, you know, needs of humanity. People are going to need stories, and I think at the moment there's a blip. I think that if you're just trying to write 6 books a year because that's how to be successful at the moment, because the amount of revenue you get per book is now so low, you just churn them out, and I think that's not sustainable. If somebody spent only a month or 2 months, and I don't mean to disrespect anybody at all, but if somebody's really rushed out a book, I don't think it's going to stand the test of time. So I look at it much, this is a blip where we are at the moment, and really good quality product, which is not necessarily what I create, it's what I aspire to create. I think long term that's still going to have a value.
It's very interesting. I've never read anybody who's churned out 6 or 7 books a year. I know Stephen King's quite prolific in terms of his efforts, but I like his stories, and he does it for the same reason that you do it. It's a love of storytelling. He's not really trying to be a millionaire. I think that's just a byproduct of things at this point for him. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's people that the people that churn out the novels, you're not going to read them anyway, right? And they're going to exhaust the living crap out of themselves, I
Well,
guess.
that's it. And this crazy, I mean, I'm in this Kindle Unlimited program because, as you know, at the moment, what's most important to me is that lots of people read my books. But it's amazing how the cost per page, the amount that the author gets paid per page has just gone down and down and down and down. When people are actually even reading your book, because there's just so much there. And so that means that people that have in the last 10 years, let's say 4 years ago, they were doing this as a job and they were earning quite good money because Kindle was new and there weren't that many people doing it, to continue generating an income which isn't a spectacular income but a livable wage. You've got to adapt now by writing twice as many books. And that just doesn't sound right to me. That doesn't sound like it's going to be the model in 5 years' time, because they'll just be.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think that's going to be the way things go.
Yeah.
I think it's called social media. I think you have to be able to interact with people. You have to be able to talk, and you have to be able to show them that you're not trying to shove stuff down their throat, and that you're doing it for another reason altogether, I guess. I mean, I look at John Scalzi and his, who he is. He's a science fiction author, right?
Yeah.
And you look at his Twitter feed, he's not saying, buy my book, buy my next book, here's my whatever the hell it is, give me money. He's tweeting out his opinions. He's interacting with his fans. He's got, millions of people that follow him, and he's, one of the top 10 authors on Amazon right now. He doesn't have to be, and he could be, struggling along with everybody else, but he is being successfully.
But
I don't know.
I've read some of his books. I do like, and if I'm thinking of the same guy, I do like. He wrote Red Shirts, I think.
Red Shirts, it's a great
Yeah.
book.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think he's been around. He's been writing. He's like a traditionally published guy. He's been there before the watershed. He's a
Whatever
very
happened,
well
whatever
established.
the watershed was, he was there before it. Exactly. Maybe it's a bad example, but I just see him using social media in a way that's beneficial to him, not trying to sell
that's
his
true.
stuff.
Yeah. So he's moved with the times as well. So yeah, absolutely fantastic.
I mean, Stephen King is kind of the tsunami of speculative fiction, right? And he does not use social media, as far as I'm aware, as well as Scalzi does. But I think his machine is so powerful that it can just basically cut through this red tape that we're looking at right now. But Scalzi, you could tell he's actually legitimately sitting in front of his computer and typing things out for people to enjoy. And he has a blog and a website.
Yeah.
He's thoroughly engaged into this thing called social media.
Well, I would love to be able to do that. I mean, I'd love to, like, with a day job, it's so difficult to devote the time. You have to. I think that's the right way to do it. To create good content, both in sort of like short articles and longer things, and then novels, and that's the dream. To be honest, that's the absolute dream. But at the moment, I find that if I was to write a lot of the shorter things and do too much blogging, I would just not have the time to write the novels, which I think are going to persist for longer, hopefully.
Yeah.
And yeah.
It's very interesting. I don't know. I write tons of short fiction, not just the flash stuff on the website. I've been kind of pulling off my, longer works of anything over 2,000 words to, 10,000 and trying to sell them to magazines, basically.
Mm-hmm.
I'm reserving that stuff, and it can last if you can get enough published. Potentially, you can sell those collections. I don't know. I do a podcast and I write as much as possibly can, so I really don't know anything. I hope somebody gives me the recipe. I'll follow it,
There
word
is
for
no
word.
recipe, and there never will be. It's as soon as there's a recipe, somebody will make the counter recipe.
Well, that's the problem, isn't it? Back when the Kindle came out and everybody was kind of feeding the slush pile with their 6 books a year and collecting emails and doing whatever they did, there was a recipe at one point, and it became useless because everybody was following it. And now we're looking for the new recipe. And unfortunately, once people start finding it and start being successful at it, it'll be void again. We'll have to find a new way to do it.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, that's it. Yeah. Again, optimistically, either we'll accept that as a society, that there will be only one in each niche, one mega company or person, or we will think that that's not acceptable, that's too many, too many people following the piper and not enough people playing the music. And like the model that I think, like you mentioned it, the family unit, and then the unit is slightly bigger. And I mean, just go back a couple of 100 years and imagine how poor the communication was then. You'd have had a rock star in every village, and that person probably would have got just as much satisfaction out of his job as Mick Jagger. And the people, because they had never seen Mick Jagger, would have been just as happy with their local bard. And everybody's happy. The guy gets
Yeah.
paid enough. He's not a billionaire, but he's got enough. He doesn't have to do any farming because people want him in all their weddings and all the parties. And every village has a writer, every village has a storyteller, every village has a teacher, and that
Even
seems,
if, I mean, they might even just have the roving, pastoral players that show up
yeah,
every once in a while, and everybody gets all excited. I mean, why do we get so excited about carnivals and stuff, because they're not
yeah,
around all the time. They're only
yeah,
there for a short amount of days, and you have to go when it's there, because if you don't, then it's going to go someplace else and you've lost your opportunity.
yeah. So there are
But now, I mean, like,
solutions.
yeah, like we were talking about, I mean, you don't have to wait anymore. You finish your book, you don't have to wait for the next one. You can find thousands of books to leaf through if you want to on a daily basis.
You can, but I mean, I find, don't you think it's a bit like TV? There's a few things that are just fantastic, and you wait a year for the next series to come around. But there's not so much that you could watch exactly what you want and the really good stuff all the time. And the same
Yeah.
with movies. I wait a month and I don't see a movie that I really like. So what always surprises me is that with so many people on this planet, there is still a shortage of really good content. So that should make us feel optimistic that if we, I don't know, I don't want to be in any way arrogant because I don't actually really expect any success, but it would be lovely. But that's what I'm trying to craft the best thing I can, because of that, not because of not because I want lots of people to buy it. So I prefer to create the best thing I can, and I hope that there'll be a market for that again one day.
I look at it like this thing that happens. I don't know if it's all over the world, but it's definitely in this country. We have the left and the right, the Coke and the Pepsi, if you like this person or that person, you are a fan till your dying day. If you like the Giants, you follow the Giants, or you like the quarterback of the Giants, which right now my quarterback is being benched, so I'm very disappointed with my favorite team. You are a fan. You're a fan till you die. And talking about that family unit that goes to space, I don't know. You look for 20,000 people that are willing to support your Patreon or something. You're okay. You got $100,000 coming in every year to write your novels or something along those lines. Maybe.
Yeah, Patreon is a really interesting model, and I'm not really sure what I think of it at the moment.
I
I
have
think
no success with it. I mean, nothing is happening. I have a Patreon account. It's not like anything is going into it, but some people can. And I'm not sure if that's because you're, a young girl and people want to impress you by giving you monthly money or something, or what.
I think I don't know. I really don't know. But I think for what you're doing for the podcasting, I think that it seems to make sense to me. Obviously, you need to find your audience as everybody else does. But it's once you've got an audience, it seems like a way of monetizing it that isn't as compromised as advertising. But it's just getting it out there, of course, like everything else. But
In
you've got
terms of
a
my podcast, I picked a very niche subject, speculative fiction, talking to authors and content creators. So my audience is you people, authors and artists and people like that.
yeah.
So, I mean, if you do a history podcast, maybe you broaden it out a little bit. Or if you do a movie podcast, you make it even more your audience becomes wider.
Yeah, I don't know. It's so dog eat dog. Everything is at
Yeah,
the moment, isn't it? So I've got no, genuinely, I've no idea. I mean, I think you've got to, the way I look at it, you've got to do some sort of marketing in order to get at least a possibility that people will start spreading it by word of mouth. You know, that
that's
if
very
you
true.
nobody,
And the only unfortunate thing is you don't know anything about marketing. I mean, you could shove things down people's throat. I mean, one thing I can't stand is commercials, right? Advertising. I hate it so much. I can't stand the break in between the entertainment that I tuned in for and for those nonsense things to be over with,
I
because
know.
you're never going to sell me on a detergent.
Yeah, I know it's horrible. I mean, again, but I think there is no alternative at the moment. So if you really stand by your principles and you never use that medium, you never use advertising of any form, well, you've got to then do something else, which would probably be, literally giving spoken word recitals and putting flyers under people's windscreen wipers, which might work. I don't know. It might work.
I have a friend in
You live in New
Yorkshire
York,
that
right?
does that, who kind of, is grassroots marketing her way through her local area.
Yeah.
She's on the radio. She's doing whatever cons are in there. She's blasting out her book locally and becoming that person that we just talked about, the local bard. She wants to be locally famous.
Yeah, and I think that's fantastic. I think that's really, really good. One of the things that because my father's an artist, he's a painter, and he's lucky enough to always have had a gallery. It's one of the he bought a gallery 30 years ago, and so he's always had somewhere to hang his paintings and sell his paintings. And that's really made me realize that one of the things in this in this whole online marketing or the whole marketing generally, one of the things that really is in short supply is physical, you know, geometry stuff in
No,
reality.
I got you.
So
Like
if you,
in my hand, basically. That's not my
yeah,
phone.
so if you're
Yeah.
like some of the things that I've thought of, I haven't done it, but you could sort of like print out 500 books and just give them away at Central Station in New York with a bookmark, which is a flyer, and if people like it, they can download the second one. I mean, it's going to cost you a lot of money, but
Yeah.
it's not actually that crazy if you consider how much other things cost.
And going back to my friend in Yorkshire, that's exactly what she does. And she just got a
Okay,
shipment
okay.
of like 50 or 60 books, and she's giving them away.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there you go. It's
She's giving them away.
horrible. It's horrible. You shouldn't have to give that stuff away. And I know some writers are quite adamant about that. They call people that give it away, blacklegs, like somebody that's betraying their worker colleagues in a miners' strike. Like they're saying that they're betraying their profession. And I see that, but I also think that there's just no way. There's no way. How can you get a piece of the pie if you don't at least let everybody know there is a pie there,
Yeah, no, my book is not free. My novel, I sit it on Amazon for the minimum amount that it can sell for, and I don't give it away to anybody unless I want you to read it and give me your opinion. I mean, as a writer, I would say, hey, would you like to read my novel? I would feel like an asshole for doing it, but but I let it sit there because eventually maybe I'll write another one and I'll let it sit right next to my first novel, and then maybe somebody will get interested and buy it. I just don't want to
Well, I
sell
don't
that
know.
thing.
I think if you've only got one book, it doesn't make any rational sense to give it away,
Hmm.
but if you've got 10 books, which I don't have, but if you've got 10 books, it's sort of like give the first one away. If people like it, then they'll buy the other 9. I mean, that makes sense to me because
But what if they're not in a series, though? I mean, if you've got one book and it's a standalone story, and your second book's a standalone story,
I don't
you're not
think that matters. Do
right.
you like your
No, I don't
favorite
know.
author? If you like, my favorite author has passed away, Ian M. Banks, and I read one of his books and I knew I had to read everything he'd ever written. So I don't think it has to be in a series if it's good enough. Neil Stevenson, I will read everything he's written.
I mean, I worked my way through the library as a kid, and I didn't pay for anything.
There you go.
So,
You
I
see?
mean, everything was free for me. You just picked up a book and you read it.
Yeah.
And that is the best way, isn't it? I mean, people have recommended print your book out, drop it off at a retirement center, and just let float around there for a while and see what happens.
Yeah.
Word of mouth is so important.
Yeah.
And you never know. I mean, obviously it can sit invisible on Amazon, or you can do something interesting and potentially get discovered for your storytelling. Don't know. You're in Switzerland, so I mean that's like you got 8 different languages being spoke there, right?
Well,
For,
yeah, English.
it's
No,
a,
no, no. Sorry,
do you,
French, German, Italian, and Reto-Romanish.
is that like German? Oh no, wait, what's that?
It's
Romanish.
I think it's also a sort of a Roman, like an Italian root for the language. I don't really know too much about it, but it's not Italian, and it's a another language not spoken by many people, but it's one of the official languages.
Switzerland is a fascinating country. It really honestly is. But as somebody who's living there, writing in English, I imagine, right? You're not writing in any other language.
No, I write in English.
Do you have a hard time finding people to read your stuff locally, or are you just on the World Wide Web?
Yeah, I'm a few people locally. I mean, lots of people that I speak to. I'm fairly promiscuous at giving away my book or recommending it. So a lot of people I know have read it, um, and there's some word of mouth that goes on there. But otherwise, I don't really push it at all in the physical world, no matter what I just told you. That I think that's a very nice way. If you owned a bookshop, you'd definitely sell some books, because you'd have your book at the front. But no, I'm online mostly. So I've got a website and I do use Facebook. So I think my audience is mostly in America and in the UK. And I think probably, because America's got a lot more people living there, I would imagine per population, there's probably a few more people in the UK, that are reading it because it's written in English, some of the spelling, but I don't think that bothers too many people. But
No, it
it's
doesn't bother
probably
me. I grew up on C.S. Lewis.
okay. Yeah,
I
yeah.
thought there was a U in color until
Okay.
and I didn't know. I unfortunately learned that way. I got a lot of I had a lot of problems in college and high school. No, that's not how you spell that. What do you mean?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's very. Charles Bukowski was very popular in Germany, and as far as I know, he only spoke English. So, or maybe he was bilingual, but he was an extremely popular German author for a long time during his life.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. There's a TV series shot where I live in Cornwall, which is massive. Where I come from in the UK, where I'm from is southwest England. It's massively popular in Germany. So my mum, who does, they've got an annex that they rent out, and a lot of the people staying there have come to the village to just experience this series in Germany. That's set in Cornwall. So it's a very strange type of media environment Germany is. There is a lot of domestic stuff, but they consume a huge amount of dubbed stuff from international.
Dubbed. Wow, it's interesting. What would you prefer, dubbed or the subtitles?
Definitely subtitles. Even
Yeah,
if
me
I'm
too.
watching something Korean, I'll just and I find that after a few minutes, you're looking at the mouth and you're
Yeah,
looking at the expressions. You don't even notice the words are printed on the screen.
yeah, totally. I agree. Subtitles are the way to go. I was in Italy for a while, and it's just like they have the dubbed movies. I'm like, this is horrible.
This
This
isn't
is
this
so
isn't Tom Cruise. Who's talking?
This is some random guy. Yeah, just man. What was it called? That Japanese food show. I wish they had subtitled that one too. Iron Chef, I think it was.
Mm,
They had it
yeah,
dubbed. I guess that was half of the joy, though, or the half the fun that people had was the horrible dubbed voices.
yeah.
What's the show in Cornwall?
I can't remember what it's called. I honestly can't remember. It's not Pole Dark, which is another one. I think it's sort of a detective series set sort of Miss Marple, Agatha Christie, but I can't remember.
Man, if you can get yourself into China, that's the way to go too. They love a good story, and I don't think a lot of authors are there yet. Just unfortunately, translating is very difficult.
Yeah, I'd love to go. Actually, I've never been to China. I went to Hong Kong once, sort of 15 years ago, which I suppose is China, but it's not mainland China. It's not, I guess, the real China. But you read about it now, and people describe it as, you know, the future. Like it's literally you're on levitating trains, or just everything has been built. This statistic I can remember, between, I think it was from 2013 to 2017, China poured more concrete than the US did in the entire 20th century.
Yeah, they built ghost cities, didn't they? They built cities in the middle of nowhere that nobody even lives in. It's absolutely flabbergasting. They built Paris and New York and London. They built all these cities in their
Yeah,
countryside
crazy.
for like this boom that they were expecting. I don't think the boom is going to happen though. And that's what I keep reading anyway. The boom is not going to happen for them. And they have all these empty concrete mega structures just lying around.
Wow.
I
Yeah.
think it's because they're planning for nuclear war, and that when we blow up their cities, they'll have a place to move their people to.
Well, I don't think that will work, because at least the US has got enough nukes to nuke all the cities and then all the ones that are rebuilt afterwards.
No, that's very true. We do have a gigantic stockpile. That's very sad, man. It's scary. I'm in New York City too. We've got a big bullseye. Imagine being on the outskirts of a nuclear explosion and watching that thing come at you.
I've just written about that.
What's that?
I've just written about that.
Oh yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
the fiction or on your blog?
No, that's I've just written about that. There were a couple of nuclear explosions in the book I've just finished, which hasn't been published yet.
Oh, the fourth
So
one.
no, the third one. So it gets pretty bad, you know.
How do you come back from it? Because I mean, we are pretty bad. I mean, they say when you're writing speculative fiction, you don't write much farther than the streetlight, the last one that you could see. So we write about our own world, we write about our own neighborhood, we write about our own experiences, and we can see nuclear explosions happening. I mean, Russia hates America, America hates Russia again. How disgusting is that? China is like saying, well, we know our neighbor to the south is dirty as hell, and if you aggress them, then we'll aggress you. But if they aggress you, then we'll stand back and watch. It's like, it could happen any second. And it's hard to be optimistic.
It is, and that's why, I mean, so the books that I like the most are set far into the future, and they're sort of somehow utopian, and the conflicts that are happening there are somehow, even though they're science fiction, they're internal. It's the most interesting question for me is, once we get everything that we've ever wanted, what we are then and what our problems are then. That's what interests me. But I didn't want to write those books. I didn't want to start with those books, because I wanted to get there. I didn't want to sort of jump to the ending and sort of write fantasies type science fiction where I hadn't specified what was possible and what wasn't. So I very deliberately started now, and my books go forward about 10 years each, and they do get crazy technology that is not the last streetlight. Already there's stuff that is, it's basically magic, but I'm very interested in the technology. I've got quite a technical background, so I try and keep the technology as realistic as possible. But I think that's the most difficult question at the moment. How the hell do we get out of the mess we're in and end up somewhere a bit better? And so that's what I'm trying to answer in these books. But I'm so looking forward to, when after I finish this series, I'm going to write a completely different book. But then I will come back to this world, and I'll take it into the future, and there'll be some, really lovely, enjoyable to write and read sci-fi craziness going on.
Yeah, that's fascinating where we're going to end up with the technology that we have. There's a book called, God, I don't know. It's about the humanity going forward, how we're called Homo sapiens now. It's Homo something else.
Okay.
Do you know the book I'm talking about?
I
Homo
don't
Prime
think so. It's
Prime or something like that.
not Ray. It's not Ray Kurzweil, is it?
I don't think so. No, it's not. I don't think so. Let me look at my overdrive real quick. It's on my list. I'm reading Homo sapiens right now, extremely slow. It's taking me
Sapiens.
forever
Is it just Sapiens, the one you're reading now?
Yeah, Sapiens. A brief history
That's a
of humankind.
fantastic, isn't that a
Oh, I love it.
fantastic book?
It's so
Yeah.
good. And the next one that he wrote is called Homo Deus, or
Oh
Dos,
yes, yes, yes. I
Deus.
haven't read it, but
Deus.
I do know of it. Yes.
I am mispronouncing. It's only a 4-letter word. You think I'd be able to say it well, but it's about the evolution of humans, right? Where we're going to end
Yeah.
up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's the common denominator, isn't it? Is that we all are human. We all spawn from, I don't know, Africa. We all have the same DNA. We all come from the same place, and we all hope for the same things, that we, have something yummy to eat, a comfortable place to sleep, and, children. It's those three things at the end of the day that we really want. Nobody wants to get blown up. Well,
No.
I guess that's not true nowadays, unfortunately. I guess some people do want to get blown up, and that's part of the problem.
It's Rule 34 or whatever.
What is that? About the internet? Somebody will find
Exactly.
it sexually stimulating.
If something exists, there's porn of it.
Yeah.
No, I don't want to bring the tone down. No, that's true. I mean, that's it. We are fundamentally humans, and that's again something I find very, very interesting. I like to expand that circle beyond humans as well. I would say that if you sat down with a gorilla, it'd be difficult to say that there were many things that we have in common with each other that we don't have in common with a gorilla. And so that's again something that I think we need to get better at as we go forward.
I mean, as far as being a gorilla, as far as being a primate, what we have wars for is to protect what's ours. We want to keep the encroaching armies away from our crops and our women and our comfortable beds. And if everybody has the same things, if we give the poorest person in Africa the medicine they need and the water to drink and the food to eat, maybe people will stop dying by the hundreds there. It's like, it's such a simple solution, but at the same time, it's so difficult to enact and make happen because of corruption and greed, right?
I think it's more fundamental than that. I don't think it's just the mechanics. I think, like you were saying about basic income, what would people do? What would everybody do? And everybody's got everything. This is what I find fascinating. This is science fiction. Everybody's got everything. You've got everything you could possibly want. What happens then? I don't think a society would be around for very long if they had that, because I think there would be no point in anything, and they'd just disappear one way or
Do you
another.
remember there was a scientific experiment, I think it was called Mouse Hotel or something like that, where they gave these mice everything they could possibly want. They had a gigantic complex of mazes and little crevices, and they gave them food, and they gave them drugs, and they gave them whatever the hell would make a person happy. They gave these mice that.
Mm-hmm.
And basically the study lasted for, let's call it years. I don't know if it was that long. At the end of the years, the colony had devolved into this horrible dystopian thing where,
Really? I don't know
yeah,
that.
where
That's
there were gluttonous mice who were eating all the food, and there were starving mice that couldn't get to the food, and there was cannibalism, and there was brutality, and it was just a horrible situation for a good portion of those mice. And at the end of the experiment, basically the mice had died out. They had everything. They had everything.
Well,
They
I mean,
overpopulated themselves, and they over-enjoyed themselves to the point where they no longer existed.
I'd love to have a link to that, because that's sort of, that really gels with my worst case scenario type thinking. That even when we've got everything, it still will be, well, it might even be more dangerous than having too little.
Desire, and you have to speak to desire, right? I mean, desire is the most motivating thing that you have. The hunters and gatherers, they would leave their warm, safe caves and go out into the scary, scary world because they desired food, or they desired something else, or they desired, I don't know, what have you, but they had a desire, or they would have just died in their caves, warm and comfortable, eventually. I don't know.
Yeah.
And my desire, I mean, if I had everything, like my fantasy when I'm like, a hard time, I think about being on a spaceship or a space station, and I have everything I could possibly want, and I'm still writing novels. You know what I mean? I'm still creating stories. If I'm stuck in like a supermax buried underground, I'm like, oh, dude, if I had some paper and pen, that'd be perfect. Solitude and just write.
I'm with you, totally with you. Yeah, that's funny, isn't it? So it's not work. This is what I would choose to do, uh, and other things. You know, I can't make music. I'm terrible at music, but I would love to be able to make music. I try to do painting. You know, I love that. So yeah, I just think that that type of freedom to express the sort of that artistic urge, that seems to be very important, but it's not important for everybody, right? So
No,
not
that's true.
everybody can do that.
What do people desire? What do they want? I mean, that's the question that they individually have to answer for themselves. And a lot of people just aren't capable of doing it for some reason. I don't know. I think about that word woke. Are certain people woke and other people are not? And is that you know yourself enough to realize what you want out of your existence? And other people just angry, sad creatures who, you know, squeak by and hurt each other and are in pain, and they have actually nothing to look forward to or nothing to dream about. I'm not sure.
Well, that's pretty bleak.
Well, it's bleak because a lot of people, when you get woke, you do find that every morning when you wake up, there's something there that's confronting you that you need to accomplish. And people can have that because it's not that you're born that way, you become that way. And you just,
I don't know quite what the term means in that context. I've only heard it sort of in the, you know, Twitter type people, and I don't really know what it means. But the way
in
you're
terms
saying
of
it, it
like,
sounds more like enlightened or
yeah, exactly. When you become more self aware and you start to question things and you start to wonder about what you are based on what you could be, and you take the steps necessary to achieve your goals and your dreams, I would call that being woke, you know, WOKE. And people who don't take every moment and try to achieve something with it aren't to that point, and maybe they will never get to that point. Maybe something happened to them earlier in their lives or something.
I don't fully agree, because I think somehow being contented is not in any way bad. And so if somebody is just happy, and some people are, then in a way that's the highest sort of form of enlightenment. I find that the other thing, getting up every day and needing to do something, which is very much how I feel, is not necessarily contented. And
Well, I mean, you're not going to be happy, right? I mean, Terry Pratchett wrote hundreds and hundreds of novels, and as he's dying of dementia, he's still writing. He didn't say, I'm done with my career, I'm completely satisfied with my life, I can die happy now. He's still trying to accomplish something.
yeah,
Whatever, his brain is rotting, he's not able to find certain letters on his keyboard, but he still did it every single day for some reason. I wouldn't call that being content
no,
to
no,
any
no,
degree,
no more,
right? So I mean,
no
it's
more.
not about happiness. Happiness is bullshit. Happiness is like an emotion that sits in the past and like taunts you or something. It's like
Well,
that.
no, again, I don't necessarily agree, because I think what you're describing is certainly I identify with that feeling, and like you said about Terry Pratchett, and you're probably that type of person as well, um, that needs to do that. But there are people that don't, and are just relatively happy or very happy, contented, and I think there's something very special about that as well. I wouldn't swap, but I guess they wouldn't swap either. And so I don't think you have to be striving for something that isn't there in order to be, you know, to be using that term woke. I think
Yeah,
it, yeah.
that was my character in the Basic Income story, is that she was fine with just laying there and letting life wash over her and not really accomplishing anything. And she had
And
her
did
money
she
coming in. She, I don't know, at the end
did
of the
she have
story.
the like you said before, um she was doing it all for her kids, or there was some sort of purpose, or was it just sort of like,
Survival. I mean, just that thing, that animalistic lizard brain, I've got to keep breathing every single day and keep my heart beating and eat food thing that was happening with her until she no longer had it. And then she discovered, you know, something else at the end of the story. But
no
that
spoilers?
I wouldn't call her in any degree. I don't, she didn't have anything. So, I mean, there are tons of people like that out there. who just sit in homeless shelters and on the street, and maybe they are addicted to drugs, and maybe they're not.
No, that's not good. But that's not what I'm talking about. But there are people that are just pretty chilled and happy with their life, and that's, I wouldn't ever want to say that being desperately in need of writing that next book or doing that next thing, which is how I feel, but I don't think that's necessarily better. But I certainly think that having some understanding, well, I don't know. I don't even know whether I can say having some understanding is better than ignorance, you know? As long as you're not hurting people and you're a good
Yeah.
person and you're helping your fellow man and your kids, and you live by a set of ethics that doesn't have to have anything to do with religion, but it's just, I think that's pretty good. It's
Yeah.
not me,
I mean,
unfortunately.
well, I mean, being in New York, you're near a whole bunch of finance people, and I can't even imagine going into work every day and staring at a bunch of numbers and watching them fall and rise, and that's basically your day to day. But those people love it, right? I mean, it takes a lot of brain power to do the math behind all that stuff. And me personally, I'd kill myself. It would be so boring, but they love it. They cannot stand to be away from it. They love the drive and the money that comes in. So I guess, I mean, in terms of, it doesn't have to be art and creativity. It can be something else that they invest their
Yeah,
mental energies
definitely.
in. That's
Definitely. Or just the satisfaction, just the pleasure of helping people. That
yeah.
is, some people have that as well, and that's such a high calling, isn't it? That
Hmm.
they just devote their life to helping others and seem sometimes so grounded because of it.
It's hard. I mean, I don't know Switzerland's crime rates or anything, but it seems in this country, just there are so many people out there longing to hurt each other, especially in the poor areas. Drugs are just rampant. It's just a really sad situation. But again, not to be pessimistic when we're trying to be optimistic here, we don't know what the future is going to be, other than the fact that I know one thing: babies are going to get born, and people are going to cook and eat meals, and houses are still going to be slept in, because we're not going to be moving to caves or anything like that. The basic desires will be met.
I don't necessarily agree with any of those points, but I'm
Well,
optimistic too. I'm
yeah,
optimistic too. I think there's some, we haven't scratched the surface of what's possible with science. We really haven't.
no,
Just nuclear fusion, for example. When that comes along, it's going to make everything free, like literally. There'll be no shortage of anything. You want bananas, you dig a hole and you put LED lights in there and you grow a banana tree, because it's cheaper than having a field on the surface, because people like it up here. There's just, and the technology, space technology, hasn't started either.
no, yeah.
People know about space elevators, but there are other things, great big structures. So I'm super optimistic, but we do have a little bit of a road bump ahead that we have to get over. Otherwise, we're not going to get there.
What's the road bump?
Well, short-term stuff is all of the ways that we're inventing to kill ourselves, and it used to be the case that we couldn't kill everybody even if we wanted to. That was only.
Certain generations certainly tried, didn't they?
Yeah, I
Didn't
know.
even get close.
There was genocide, but which is terrible. I'm not in any way trying to defend genocide. Genocide is absolutely appalling. But
Hmm.
after the invention of the nuclear bomb, we could, for the first time ever, we could destroy everybody.
Yeah.
And now we're inventing technologies that could potentially destroy everybody once every decade. New ones, biological, nanotechnology, AI, you name it. We will come up with them once every 10 years, then once every 5 years, and once every year, and then the old ones like nuclear technology will be accessible to more and more people. You can build one in your shed, and that's one big problem that we've got.
Yeah. In the ice age, the human population on this planet dropped down to like 30,000 or something along those lines. It doesn't take like a big portion of humans to repopulate the Earth. It's going to take a really long time.
Well,
So,
Elon
but
wants
this,
to put 1 million people on Mars. He says that 1 million is a very sustainable economy. You can build anything, you can do anything, and he reckons we could get 1 million people on Mars by the end of this century. Which
It's fascinating to think that. I mean, really, it's so interesting. I saw his diagram of a Martian city, and it just made me want to write fiction all day long about it.
yeah,
And it's
yeah,
just
yeah,
it's just really interesting.
definitely.
Did you read God, what's his name? Did you read Endurance, about the astronaut who sat for a year on the space station?
No.
It's painful. It's not
Why did he
enjoyable.
sit? Why did he sit there? He was up there doing work, or
Yeah,
he was
Scott
on
Kelly, I
the.
think his name was. He was
Mhm.
he now holds the record along with a Russian for the longest time
Okay, okay,
on the International Space Station, and he said it was the most miserable experience. And getting to Earth again after he was up there for a year, his recovery
yeah,
was just impressive.
yeah,
And going to Mars, I mean, you've got so many things that you have to accomplish, but man, the idea of it, and that, and a lunar city too. I mean, just there are so
yeah.
many places to live, and we're just this tiny little blue bubble. And it's really sad that we're stuck here.
Well, we're not. We can write anything. So
That's
we
true. Our imaginations are free completely, aren't they?
exactly,
Unburdened by physics.
exactly. Well, no, no, no. Well, not in my books. I try and at least give a friendly nod to physics.
Well, man, we've talked for an hour and 15 minutes. It's been a fantastic conversation, and I do like to end these things with three questions.
Okie
You
dokie.
know, you're pretty prolific in terms of your writing, and you've written three novels already. You're on your fourth one now, or you're on your third one now, and you will be writing a fourth one.
I finished the third one. I've written a bit of the fourth one, but I haven't published the third one yet. I
It's
like to give
impressive.
myself a bit of buffer so that I can mess around with the continuity. If I have to change something in one, it's easier if it's not yet published.
What advice would you give somebody who is struggling to find the energy to do what you're doing, who wants to do it but just can't do it? Or, I mean, thinking of that person that just doesn't have any drive but wants to find the drive, what would you tell that person to give them motivation?
Well, I think that the drive has to come first. So if you want something and you don't feel you've got the drive, I think that's the drive. I think that's it. And if it's very difficult to motivate yourself to do anything. Sport, for example, it's always easier when it's raining not to go out.
Uh,
uh, but it's that really, I think that grit, being able to do something that you don't want to do, because you do want to do it. So I think if you want to do it, that's the drive. And if you want to do it, be honest with yourself, and just do it. And if you haven't got any time, then maybe just do small pieces, and blog them occasionally, and share them with your friends. But I guess also, if you haven't got much time and you can write a little bit every now and again, do think about the long sort of arc, and maybe, like you said, think about the possibility of publishing them all together at some point. So I think there's a way. It might take a very long time. I wrote for 8 years before I published anything. So you have to have a long time horizon. Books don't write themselves quickly.
no, yeah, and true. I really think that they're a slow braise too. I mean, you have to really take your time with them to make them tender and good.
Yeah.
Just don't know how people can write 6 a year, honestly. My second question for you would be, what are you reading right now? What's on your Kindle? What's on your night table?
Terribly, I pretty much have stopped reading
Ah,
since I've started writing. Not over 8 years, but now I don't have any time. Like literally, I hardly have any spare time. So it's very difficult for me to find the time to read. So what I do is, when I'm on holiday, when I go away on holiday with my family, then I'll take 4 or 5 books with me, and I'll just read them. So I love Charles Stross, the Atrocity Archives series. I prefer his sci-fi, but he doesn't write so much of that these days. But I love pretty much anything he writes. He's a great author. I've read all of Ian M. Banks' stuff, so he's my favorite author. But I do tend to just go back and reread things. Neil Stephenson's books, I wait.
I was going to ask you if you read Seven Eves.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh my God, that's such a good book. Talking about an optimistic ending too, from just a horrible, horrible nightmare of a story, and then he's got this whole thing happening in the atmosphere. Oh man, that book was amazing.
Yeah, I love his books, and probably Snow Crash and the Diamond Age are my favorites, or Cryptonomicon, maybe right up there with the best books. But yeah, I haven't got too many. I'm really looking for a really good sci-fi, to move on to at the moment. I love Werner Vinge. I love Greg Egan. I don't want to try and list them all now because I'll forget some that are so important. But yeah, I'm looking for the next really great sci-fi that I love.
Read Andy Weir's Artemis. It's not bad.
I will. Yes,
just for the world building alone. That dude spent a year building up the physics of living on the moon, and it really shows.
I love Ready Player One, for example. That I read that relatively recently.
Good?
It's great.
I ate that up in like a couple days. It was so good, and it's not as his other books aren't as good. That was just an amazing piece of fiction.
I agree. I wasn't super keen on the second one, but yeah, I thought Ready Player One was a masterpiece.
I wonder how Steven Spielberg is going to translate that to the screen. I'm hoping that it's not completely destroyed. But then again, I guess if we love the book, there's no way they're going to come close to the movie. So just go into it expecting disappointment.
Well, it'll be a big nostalgia thing, won't it? If Steven Spielberg does it, but it'll be great, I'm sure.
Oh man, watching Ender's Game was so sad. Harrison Ford is in it too. It wasn't able to save it for me. Where can we find you on the World Wide Web?
I am on Twitter and but I'm not particularly active there. Facebook, I'm pretty active, and I've got a website, tobyweston.net, and there I post every now and again. I post articles. I try and do a couple a month, and you can find all my books there.
I'll just basically
comments, I guess. Then I can
yeah, definitely. If you send me another email with all of your social media stuff, I will put that in the notes for the show. Absolutely, 100%.
Awesome. Well, this was a real pleasure, Brian. It was lovely talking. It feels like it hasn't been an hour and 15 minutes, but I look at the clock and it has. So that's always a good sign, isn't it?
I've really enjoyed this conversation a lot. I'm happy to get into stuff like this. Unfortunately, sometimes because I don't talk all day long, my tongue doesn't want to cooperate. But hey, you at least dealt with me, so I appreciate that very much.
No, it was awesome. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, and I'll be waiting with bated breath until it's published, and then I can see myself or hear myself and then cringe at my horrible voice.
Yeah, in the beginning it was like that for me too, but now it's like, okay, I just ignore myself and listen to whoever I'm talking to. And I don't think there's anything in this podcast that you need to worry about in terms of getting edited out. I really enjoyed the conversation. Next week, probably Wednesday, I'll publish. And then maybe in about 4 weeks, it'll be on the actual podcast feed. So next week will be YouTube, and then on the podcast feed from there.
Okay, cool. Yeah, well then that's great. And yeah, let's keep in touch. I think I've seen you are on Twitter, right?
Yes.
And Facebook. No, I just saw you on Facebook. So yeah, let's keep in touch. And yeah, if I do anything in future, I'll let you know, and then we can see if we can help each other climb up this mountain.
The slush pile of fiction that's out there right now. It is an exciting time to be a writer, though. I mean, there are tons of people out there innovating the written words. I mean, God, can you imagine in 100 years what the scholars will say about this time in writing?
Well, you know what? I just hope that in a way that you could see that as an advantage. If everybody else is just churning stuff out, then the few people that are left there crafting patiently, whittling away, whatever, I think those will be the ones that are remembered in 100 years. So that's what gives me optimism.
Sadly, we probably won't be around to know what they're saying, but hey, what are you going to do? Optimism. All right, Toby, again, man, I really enjoyed this conversation. I look forward to having you back on. You have a great day.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, you too. Cheers, Brian.
Bye-bye.